Hey everyone, and welcome to the third episode in a new video series presented by KupoCon, where I'll be exploring the Final Fantasy VII compilation lore and Easter eggs that appear in the remake. I'm MJ Gallagher, author of the unofficial Final Fantasy VII Novelisation, the standalone novel The Nibelheim Incident, which is now an audio series also produced by KupoCon, and the forthcoming book, Norse Myths That Inspired Final Fantasy VII. The purpose of this series is to discuss a lot of the detail hidden within the remake, and to provide a broader understanding for new and veteran fans alike. In the last episode, I spoke in depth about Chapter 2 of the game, Fateful Encounters, which covers the immediate aftermath of the Mako Reactor 1 bombing, and Avalanche's escape from Midgar's Sector 8 plate. This time around, I'll be breaking down Chapter 3, titled Home Sweet Slum. Obviously, it'll include spoilers for this section of the game, but anything beyond Chapter 3 is minimal and mainly speculation. However, as always, if you're not familiar with the original story, there will very likely be heavy spoilers. Chapter 3 opens at the Sector 7 Slum train station, and the scene plays out exactly as it does in the old game. The team celebrates their success, though there remains an undertone of uncertainty about the level of destruction far exceeding what they had intended. The area itself is a real trip down memory lane for veteran fans, and there are a number of familiar NPCs dotted around. First of all, on the side of the carriage is the identifier DG56388. This again matches the original, but it requires a bit of an eagle eye, as the only time it's shown in the old game is the FMV when the train is encircling the central pillar. Then there's the station guard dressed in his red uniform and cap, a regular figure in the original. It's not addressed here because he's dealing with a drunkard, but it was previously suggested that his counterpart in the old game was the same one present when Aerith was found by Elmira. At the foot of the steps, you'll also find the lovers, and their, let's say, passionate dialogue makes a triumphant return. Like before, the man throws out the idea of sneaking into the train graveyard for a bit of, romance. And if you run to the end of the station, you'll see the entrance to the train graveyard itself is no longer easily accessible, but the ghosts there are still rumoured to be attacking locals. Further along the trail is a Shinra facility whose gateway is being protected by a pair of security officers. This location is never seen by players in the original, but the infantrymen share some comical dialogue. What's particularly interesting here is that when you return at the end of Chapter 4, the rookie tells his mentor that he has tickets to Loveless and asks if he would like to go. This conversation is lifted directly from the old game, where the reference to Loveless was completely throwaway, but it now carries a lot more weight in the compilation. As before, the enclosure where the Sector 7 pillar can be accessed is directly opposite the duo, and looking up at it in the remake really reinforces the sheer scale and complexity of it. Towards the town, you also pass by a crowd watching the news broadcast. This becomes a common theme throughout the game, especially when Shinra's propaganda machine starts churning out fake news. There are a couple of nice touches here about the emergency actions taken by Shinra, however, including another reference to Mayor Domino. It's also really cute to see Tifa and Marlene waiting outside for the team to arrive back at 7th Heaven. When Cloud and Tifa get a moment alone though, he makes reference to them not seeing each other for 5 years. Tifa pauses at this as if to query it, but the moment quickly passes. Anyone familiar with the original game will obviously know that it hasn't been 5 years since she last saw Cloud. I really love how these blink and you miss it moments have been implemented throughout the game, because they address so many small plot holes from the original without drawing too much attention to them for new or casual players. While there was a degree of focus on Barrett's relationship with Marlene in the old game, and the conflict he faces being both a father and an environmental revolutionary, the remake really goes the extra distance to show his softer side. However, we also learn that he has already been teaching her about the spiritual nature of life and death. This is evident when Marlene asks about people returning to the planet, a phrase closely associated with those knowledgeable in spirit energy and the life stream. As for the bar itself, the welcome mat on the floor shows a unique logo for 7th Heaven. This emblem first appeared in Advent Children, hanging up on the sign outside the new premises in Edge. The later establishment is owned by Cloud, Tifa and Barrett, and is the base of operations for the Strife delivery service. Its origins are explained in the official novella, On the Way to a Smile. Another thing I really enjoyed is how the remake's creators have taken a basic element from 7th Heaven's design and built an entire side quest out of it. The jukebox, where players can buy or acquire music to play during the game, is actually part of the background in the original, also positioned beside the pinball machine, but more on that later. In the far corner behind the bar, there are also two photographs hanging above the door. These are respectively the interior and exterior shots of 7th Heaven from the original, and I'll return to these later. I briefly mentioned the character Kyrie Kanan in the last episode, a young girl who is a primary protagonist from the official Final Fantasy VII novel The Kids Are Alright by Kazushige Nojima. She appears again in the square in front of 7th Heaven, providing locals gossip from the plate and charging them for the information. Tifa then leads Cloud to his new lodging at Stargazer Heights. There are a couple of references here that some fans may have missed, specifically the name of the accommodation and that the duo's rooms are adjacent. One of the original Final Fantasy VII's most iconic scenes is the flashback Cloud and Tifa have when the former tries to leave 7th Heaven. In it, they recount a promise they made as kids atop the water tower in Nibelheim that if Cloud ever joined Soldier, he would come rescue Tifa should she get herself into trouble. The scene ends with the pair gazing up into a starry night and a shooting star passes overhead. This is where Stargazer comes from. Slightly more abstractly, in the original game when Cloud is greeted by Tifa the following morning, one of the dialogue options is to tell her he slept well because he was next to her. This reflects the placement of their rooms in the remake. During the night, Cloud hears the individual in the room on the other side of him moving around. He goes to investigate and gets a fright as he sees Sephiroth inside, causing him to stumble back. When the figure grabs his ankle, he gets a vision of several black-cloaked individuals wandering in a desolate rocky terrain, calling out for the reunion. Cloud's mind quickly returns to the present to discover that this is in fact not Sephiroth, but one such robed man. Tifa tells Cloud his name is Marco, indicating he is harmless but quite sick, and has a tattoo of the number 49 on his arm. It's important to highlight a few things here because this one scene changes plot details quite a bit. In the original game, the black cloaked figures are what are described as Sephiroth clones, but this is simply the term used by Professor Hojo to identify those who have gone through similar cellular experimentation to Sephiroth. Due to the Genova cells present in their bodies, they are driven to gather at the reunion, basically the reunification of Genova. It is his own exposure to the same material that explains why Cloud sees Sephiroth when he encounters the robed individuals. Each are tattooed by a different number, and no more than 18 of them are ever encountered in the old game, meaning that Marco's identification as Person 49 is quite a jump. Marco is certainly not the first Sephiroth clone to ever appear in Midgar, because the original has the infamous "this guy are sick" dude, who had the tattoo number 2, albeit he is not cloaked and the relevance of it isn't realised until the party reaches Nibelheim. This scene is, however, the first time Cloud has ever had a vision of the future, because what he actually saw was the gathering at the northern crater, where the real Sephiroth is. It's unclear what the connection is here, but I'll talk about why there seems to be many more clones in the remake in a later episode. One of the things I've loved most about the game is being able to explore the slums in the daylight. It was possible to do in Crisis Core as well, but that was definitely a lot more grey than what we have now. I've spent so much time just gazing up at the underside of the plate just because of how beautifully crafted the cityscape is. It does, however, throw up a minor inconsistency. In the original game, Barrett comments on the train how the slums don't have any day or night, and you can't see the sky because of the plate. While this is certainly true to an extent, it's hard to argue that the slums are totally deprived of daylight. When you return to 7th Heaven, you'll notice a white cat with a pink collar loitering outside. This is one of 3 felines you have to find during the side quest for the schoolgirl Betty, but the cat's aesthetics are not a coincidence. In Before Crisis Episode 12, the player Turk gets stranded on Mount Nebel while trying to investigate the Mako reactor. Tifa suddenly appears, chasing her cat up the mountain. The same cat later helps the player find Tifa after she is wounded by Sephiroth, and guess what? She's white with a pink bow as a collar. Tifa later asks Cloud to help her collect the water filters, and he responds by saying he's not a salesman, he's a soldier. This may be a reference to Zack helping Aerith sell flowers during Crisis Core. While on their rounds, Cloud and Tifa visit a couple of places from the original game. The weapons shop and beginner's hall are the most notable of these. Biggs and Wedge are found in the latter, and this is where the player is properly introduced to the neighbourhood watch and weapons modification. However, when Biggs first suggests modding the Buster Sword, Cloud hesitates. The camera thereafter lingers on the Great Blade, showing a substantial amount of wear, tear and rust. The importance of this moment is the heritage of the Buster Sword, as detailed in Crisis Core. Its initial owner, Zack's mentor Angeal, only uses it in emergencies to avoid such wear, tear and rust. Zack tried to do the same when he inherited it, so Cloud's pause is likely him reflecting on this. Cloud and Tifa test out the modifications at Scrap Boulevard and later return to the beginner's hall. When Biggs asks how Cloud found the differences he made, Cloud says that he and the sword have been through a lot together. I really like how Cloud gets a mental jolt every time he tries to recollect something that relates to his past in Soldier. It's almost as if someone else is giving him a wee kick. When we are finally introduced to Johnny, the Shinra security officers have chased him from his home and drag him off to a nearby facility for interrogation. Tifa makes it pretty clear that she's concerned for her friend's safety, but also that he is likely to spill the beans on some of Avalanche's activities. To prevent this, they pursue Johnny and overhear the Shinra accusations that his personal ID popped up on a warehouse log where explosives were stolen. Johnny suspects that this was Jessie, which ties in nicely with a conversation she has with Cloud in the original game. On the train home to the Sector 7 slums, Jessie tells Cloud that for their next mission, she'll make him an ID for the checkpoints. It's therefore implied that the ID Cloud is using at the time is the one she stole from Johnny. Chapter 3 is also the first in the game to have side quests given by NPCs. 2 of these take place in the abandoned Gallagher factory just outside of town, an area which is new to the remake. I'm curious about where the name comes from and whether it pops up at a later point in the series. The respective missions here are to eradicate some drakes that have taken up residence. These are flying enemies, and one of the first occasions we really get to see the extent to which Cloud and Tifa can leap skyward to perform airborne attacks. This has director Tetsuya Nomura's style all over it, but it's absolutely consistent with the action from Advent Children. The interesting thing though is that while Cloud is allegedly an ex-soldier and thus has superhuman abilities, there's no real explanation as to why Tifa is capable of such feats. And while we're on the subject of Tifa's martial arts, if you access her battle settings menu, you'll see that her somersault limit break is described as a Zangen style swift kick. Zangen of course was Tifa's martial arts instructor back in Nibelheim and played a minor role in the incident there 5 years ago. Now, this isn't even the first reference to Zangen that appears in Chapter 3, but the earlier one is so fleeting that most players won't have spotted it. When Cloud and Tifa are walking towards the beginner's hall, he asks her if she's been in Midgar for a while. She says she's been here for 5 years, give or take, then quickly changes the subject. As it happens, you find a letter from Zangen hidden in the piano of Tifa's old house, explaining that he took her to a hospital in Midgar following the events of Nibelheim. This is where the time frame comes in. Another side quest of interest is On the Prowl, where Weimer advises a Shinra mutt has gone feral on Scrap Boulevard. This turns out to be a Wrathhound, and defeating it grants you some curious information in the enemy intel screen. It says the hound's ferocity and muscular physique is the result of ability enhancing drugs administered to guard dogs, something no doubt carried out by Shinra's research and development department. Its survival and escape to the slums mirrors the story of several side missions Zack has to undertake in Crisis Core as part of the monster investigation program. Here, Zack is hunting beasts that have escaped from Hojo's lab. Even more curious is what happens when you return to Weimer. Cloud asks about the hound, and the neighbourhood watchman makes reference to a Shinra lab hidden beneath the slums. In case you didn't make the connection, he's actually talking about Deepground, the covert soldier facility from Dirge of Cerberus. In that game, there are 3 secret reports that can be found which provide a fragment of insight into the history of the mysterious soldier known as G, who, as we learn in Crisis Core, is Genesis. In one of the reports, it said the vagrants who dwell in the slums speak of rumours that G slumbers in the caverns below Midgar. Believe it or not, this is also followed up in Chapter 4, but I'll discuss that next time. The bonus for completing all side quests is access to Tifa's room at Stargazer Heights for a little bit of alone time. There's a short cutscene between the two which begins to scratch the surface of their past. Tifa asks Cloud what happened to him after he left their hometown, and they make reference to soldiers always being on the news during the war, kids wanting to be like them, and there being no need for heroes by the time Cloud had enlisted. These are all lifted directly from the conversation in the original when the party stays overnight in Calm, where Cloud first tells the others about the Nibelheim tragedy. During the cutscene, you can see a music poster above Tifa's bed, including the keys of a piano or keyboard. This is a callback to the grand piano in her bedroom at Nibelheim. She says she used to play as a kid, and if you return there later in the old game, performing Tifa's theme on the piano will grant you her ultimate limit break, Final Heaven, as well as the aforementioned letter from Zangen. Tifa then goes on to suggest that she and Cloud dress up and hit the town to celebrate their reunion. One of the options of what she should wear is something exotic, and she comments that Cloud should pick an outfit to match. If this isn't a piece of foreshadowing for the wall market cross-dressing scenario, I will eat my hat. After the scene, you get a moment to look around the room. There's a stand at the end of Tifa's bed, which has a pair of brown cowboy boots underneath. These are of course very similar to those she wears during the Nibelheim incident. Downstairs, Marl gives you the Crescent Moon Charm accessory, which, if you select it in the equipment menu, is described as being imbued with the fervent desire to be by one's side for eternity. This is first and foremost a clear indicator of how Tifa feels about Cloud. but is also a reference to the On the Way to a Smile novella. In the Tifa chapter, she has a narrative where she sees herself as being by Cloud's side forever, in a romantic sense or otherwise. Back at 7th Heaven, we finally get to see the pinball machine elevator in action, as Barrett and Marlene emerge from the secret room below. In the original game, of course, this was Avalanche's base of operations. It sadly has not been recreated for the remake, but at least reference to its existence made the final cut. A cool little tidbit though is the code to make it move. The number 777,777 can be seen, both a nod to the title's number in the series, but also to the All Lucky 7 status in the original game. Earlier in the episode, I spoke a little about some of the furnishings around 7th Heaven, but I'd like to highlight a couple more items now that we have access to the area behind the bar. First of all, there's a framed image on a shelf above the jukebox. I previously pointed out the photos hanging above the back door, respectively showing the interior and exterior of 7th Heaven in the original game. If you look closely here, you'll perhaps note this photo is actually a wide angle shot of the new bar that gets constructed in Edge. This particular view appears on two occasions. Once at the beginning of Advent Children when Tifa is cleaning up, and again at the end of Dirge of Cerberus when Shulk is sitting in the corner. And this is where we get into some real deep dive territory. Not only is this photo of a location that doesn't exist yet, but the Advent Children version contains the same original exterior shot as the one above the back door in the remake, while the Dirge of Cerberus version contains the same original interior shot. It's like an Easter egg within an Easter egg within an Easter egg. Across the room, you can also see a framed painting which seems to be concept art for the remake. If so, that means we have a historic version, a current version, and a future version of 7th Heaven on the walls. In the corner above the toilet door, there's also a vehicle registration on display. It reads LOC053, which suggests it's personalised to Tifa, whose surname is of course Lockhart. It's also the only registration we've seen so far in the game that doesn't begin with SHR for Shinra. Now, I'll hold my hands up and admit I missed this last one in my original playthrough, but my friend and community guru, Shidemp, has brought to my attention another Easter egg on the door of the fridge. There's a piece of artwork here which has presumably been drawn by Marlene, and accompanying it are two photos. You have to get in real close to see, but the image on the lower right is a portion of the photograph that appears at the end of Advent Children. In it, Marlene is cradling Kate Sith, with Red 13 standing beside her and Barrett in front of the entrance to the new 7th Heaven in Edge. Not only does this give us a glimpse of two main characters from the original game, it's another photograph that's technically from the future. Curious. And just as a side note, for those of you who were wondering, despite my Scottish accent, I'll be pronouncing the robotic feline's name as Kate Sith, rather than the etymologically correct Cat She, simply because that's how Reeve says it in Dirge of Cerberus. Before heading down to the basement, Tifa makes Cloud a couple of cocktails at the bar. The second of these is red in colour and the house speciality called the Cosmo Canyon. This is a multi-layered reference. Firstly, the Cosmopolitan is one of the most famous cocktails in the real world. Secondly, while it isn't made clear in the international versions of the original game, Avalanche was not founded by Barrett. In fact, as is confirmed in the Ultimania Omega, the organisation has its roots in the study of planetary life, which is of course based at Cosmo Canyon. Therefore, the house speciality cocktail is a hidden in plain sight allusion to 7th Heaven being connected to Avalanche. When the others reappear in the bar, the conversation eventually turns to their branch of Avalanche making an amicable separation from HQ. This relates back to Chapter 1 when Jessie quips that she had to get access codes to the reactor through different sources because Command wouldn't respond to her. While we know Barrett's incarnation of Avalanche wasn't the first, the larger organisation are the main antagonists of Before Crisis, with the game providing a comprehensive history for them. The climax of Before Crisis suggests that Fajito's extremist branch has been eradicated by the time Final Fantasy VII begins, but here we have confirmation that it continues to operate in some form. Furthermore, the amicable separation of Barrett's group a year ago loosely ties in with the re-emergence of Fajito's wing during episode 18 of Before Crisis. Incidentally, this is the very episode where Red 13 is captured by Shinra. Having been dismissed from Avalanche's activities, Cloud leaves 7th Heaven and spots a gang of men outside. Engaging them in conversation reveals them to be on the lookout for someone who matches Barrett's description. The red dragon symbol on their clothing also identifies them as Don Corneo's men. This is interesting because in the original game, when Cloud, Tifa and Aerith interrogate the Don, he reveals that he was ordered by Heidegger to find out where the man with the gun arm was hiding in the slums. Therefore, what Cloud unwittingly encounters in this moment is Corneo's lackeys carrying out those very orders. What I love about it though is that he decides to take them all down rather than give up Barrett, even if he has just been cast aside for the next job. It says a lot about Cloud as a character. Well guys, this has been my recap of the compilation lore and Easter eggs from Chapter 3 of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I hope you've enjoyed it, and please be sure to leave a comment with any feedback or something you think I've missed. If you haven't already done so, I invite you to check out my Patreon account, where you'll find free downloads of my unofficial novelisation of Final Fantasy VII, the Nibelheim Incident, and much more. Subscribers also get access to a huge amount of original content as well, including project artwork, behind the scenes podcasts, mythology articles, etc. And be sure to look out for my new book, Norse Myths That Inspired Final Fantasy VII, which launches in mid-2020. But, until next time, take care. I'm MJ Gallagher, in association with KupoCon, and I'll speak to you again soon.